One, and I think we are live. I am waiting for the confirmation. There it goes. Hello, everyone. I am here. We're doing an interview with Marcus Vine of Warlord Games. Hi, Marcus.
Hello, Bo. Thank you very much for having me.
Marcus, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? When did you start in the hobby, and when did you start working at Warlord Games, and what's your job there?
Yeah, so in the hobby, I think I started probably when I was about sort of 8 or 9. I'd grown up sort of building, Airfix kits with dad. And then in the school library, there must have been a teacher who was a big Warhammer fan because
Yeah.
there were loads of white dwarfs, like old classic white dwarfs. And I got into reading those, and it was just kind of like, wow, I can
Yeah.
tell stories with these models. I can play games with these models instead of just building them and putting them on a shelf. Honestly, I was hooked ever since. And then, in terms of Warlord, I've been with Warlord, God, now about coming on for 4 years, I think. It feels like it's been forever and also no time at all because obviously we had COVID in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's been a
That
couple of,
must have sucked.
yeah, it was really weird, to be honest. I was only on furlough for about 3 weeks. And
Yeah.
then we came back to do the customer service, remotely, and it was just insane. Um, in terms of my job at Warlord, so right, I've got kind of a long-winded job title. So right now, I'm Warlord Games tournament coordinator and hobby content producer. So really,
Hobby content producer. Wow, that's a long one.
so really, I've got two jobs. I have
Yeah.
two different roles, which I split my time between. So the hobby content producing job is writing articles for the newsletter. Writing kind of copy for the website, anything that where we're talking to our customers, and we want writing to be done. That tends to be something that I do. That falls into my department, and obviously Dan, our newsletter editor, is my boss there.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the job, the tournament coordinator job, that's just at the simplest. It's about enabling and supporting TOs around the world to put the best events possible on that they can and giving them all the help they need and kind of rewarding the efforts that they put into it. And for that, Paul Sawyer's my boss. So
Yeah.
it's two roles that I kind of balance day to day.
Right. And just for the viewers here who might be interested in that, I will make sure that I get the contact info from you, so that you people can go in the doobly-doo and just find a link to go. And where do you find and how do you contact Warlord Games in case somebody doesn't know?
Yeah. So the absolute best way to do that, wherever you are in the world, is just to email info@warlordgames.com. Oh, you've suddenly disappeared, though.
How
Hello.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. You just disappeared for a little bit then.
Yeah, something went off with my headset. I'm not sure what. I'm going to try and do it on the mic of my computer. Sorry about that, everyone. I have no idea if anyone could hear what you just said, Marcus.
Oh,
Could you
we'll
just?
try it again. This is no problem. So yeah, for contacting me, if you're anywhere in the world, email info@warlordgames.com and just put in the subject, tournament, or I want to run a tournament or something like that. I check the inbox every day, and what will happen is obviously, if you're in America, I'll put you in touch with John Russell, who's our man for all things American and events. If you're in Australia, I will put you in touch with the lovely guys over at War and Peace. And if you're anywhere else in the world, congratulations, you're dealing with me.
Yeah.
And we'll start the conversation from there and get the ball rolling.
So that means that your job is basically covering all of Europe, the UK, Asia, and Africa.
Yep, absolutely.
That's a big area of geography to cover. Right. Um, So I had a few questions. So, like the tournament support that you're organizing for TOs, how does
Yeah.
that work? What is
So
it?
yeah. So we've got a brand new system. Well, I say brand new, it's a few months old now, but we've got a system that's in place. It's very simple. It's a tiered system. And all it relies on is the more people your tournament has, then the more people your event has, the more support that you'll receive. And that's designed so that it's really simple. Everyone knows what they're getting, and every tournament in the same size bracket gets treated the same. So there's no distinction of, oh, you're using these rules, or this event isn't strictly competitive, someone gets different prizes. It is
so it's all based on the number of attendees, basically.
Absolutely, 100%. No, the minimum is 8 players, and then it just goes up from there. We've got 4 tiers. The highest tier is tier 4, obviously, which is designed for events with 82 plus players. So, you know, that's your huge events. That's where that one comes in. I find the majority of events fall into tier 2 at the moment, which starts at 16 to 18 players. And that seems to be a good, you know, sort of place for a lot of smaller tournaments, because that's not most people you can fit into a hall or, you know, a normal sized club without having to book an extra venue.
It is. So, and it's also a question of how far spread apart are people that play, right? So
absolutely,
you're going to have to travel to get to an event, and so how much of your geography can you actually collect players from? That also affects the size of events.
Yeah, massively. So, you know, we see that, you know, we see sometimes, you know, especially in a lot of countries, there'll be, you know, 3 or 4, you know, tier 1 or tier 2 events scattered around. And then, you know, there might be one tier 3 event where once a year everyone tries to get together, you know, whether that's the nationals or it's a big convention or something like that. You know, we often see that. You know, we're very lucky in the UK that geographically we're actually a pretty tiny country. You know, it's not actually that hard to get from, you know, Scotland to England to Wales. You know, especially when you start factoring in places like Europe or America, Australia.
And I've just been talking to a lot of players in South Africa, and that is pretty far. They have to travel just to go to an event.
I remember Rudy was telling me, you know, all the places where the players were coming from was that. And I went away and I looked them up and I was like, wow, that's impressive. That's dedication.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Right. So next on my list is, and of course that's because I sit in the EU, Brexit and how did all that affect Warlord Games and the sales that you guys had? I know you've set up a European distribution center. Is that right?
Honestly, that one I don't know about. That's all for the trade guys. In terms of how Brexit affected us, it did. It affected, you know, the whole world. And it didn't help at the same time that, you know, pretty soon after COVID came along.
COVID came in and knocked it back, yeah.
The biggest thing that we noticed, I think, to be honest, was just the cost of shipping.
Yeah.
The cost of shipping. And then it became worse and worse with COVID as fewer ships were sailing, fewer planes were traveling, fewer lorries were on the roads. And, you know, that's been really challenging, actually. I think the guys that deal with our logistics have done an amazing job now starting to get those costs back to something more normal, back to a little bit more of how it used to be. But there was a real period where it was absolutely chaos. It was chaos because, you know, there were no new regulations. Nobody knew what was legal in the government, you know.
Exactly.
And then it was just a case, and then obviously the shipping companies put their prices up because it's all uncertain. But touch wood, we're getting through the worst of that now, and it is, you know, it's not like, oh, we can't ship to Europe. You know, it's just a case of we had to adjust and adapt to the changing conditions, which I think we've done pretty well.
Yeah, and I guess the recent war in Ukraine and the prices going up will also affect you guys coming into next year, maybe.
Honestly, I don't know about that. Again, it's one of those things where macroeconomically, it's so enormous. The world impact's so enormous that, you know, the prices of oil going up and gas going up, so fuel goes up. I know here in the UK, we've had a big energy crisis, you know, cost of living and price crisis. And, you know, our electricity bills, our gas bills and things, they're all going to go up eventually. And at the minute, it's just uncertain, really. But then, you know, we've got guys that work really hard to make sure that we are future-proofed a little bit and that, you know, we're not going to get caught out. It's just we know that difficult times but everyone are coming. And I think, we've done a pretty good job of setting ourselves up so that we can navigate those difficult times and not get caught out and not get trapped in any situations.
That sounds really good, really good. I know you, just clearing out the air, Marcus is not here in any official capacity representing Warlord Games or anything. We're just having a chat on the internet. We're just two dudes sitting one afternoon chatting on the internet. So when I am asking him about all this stuff about Warlord Games, you're completely free to not answer any of it, Marcus, basically. But I do have a few extra things, because I was wondering whether or not Warlord Games was pressured by Brexit and by COVID and by then the economy turning downwards now. I know for myself, and this is anecdotally, right? I've actually been spending more on my hobby during the COVID years, because I was sitting at home and I was painting while I was doing my job. So I was just wondering if you guys saw any of that in the other end.
Absolutely. Over COVID, we had these massive logistical pressures, but by the same token, we also saw people picking up the hobby much more, whether that was existing customers buying more stuff because, as you say, they're stuck at home. But one of the things that was really gratifying was there were loads of people that kind of got in touch and was like, oh, I've got back into the hobby after, 10, 15, 20 years because I'm stuck at home and there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
So that was quite heartening, actually. And yeah, it sounds a bit bad to say, but yeah, COVID, the actual pandemic, we did quite well in terms of sales and making money. It was just all the other associated challenges.
Everything else, yeah.
If it hadn't been a horrible global pandemic and there hadn't been all those problems and all those people affected, we could say it was a pretty good year. But obviously, because there was all that extra stuff, it was just kind of it was a silver lining to a pretty awful and weird time in everyone's lives.
So, and again, you cannot answer if you don't want to, but do you know what's next on the front for the models? That's what we're here for, right? We're just nerds playing with toy soldiers. So everyone is curious. What are you guys planning next?
Well, obviously we've got, the Alpini, there'll be plastic Italian Alpini will be out at some point, I think it's next year now. And that'll be with the Tough Old Gut Italy campaign book. There's plenty of other stuff in the works. There's the armored cars, the new 221, 222, and the Humber that came out in Gentleman's War. They'll be separately available in due course in the future. And there's plenty of other stuff that I know about that I can't talk about. Obviously, the biggest announcement we had at the open day was Hail Caesar revised edition. And there's been the new Caesar's Gallic Wars starter set that's coming out with that. So that's been a lot of our work recently. Plenty of new stuff, things like Judge Dredd. Of course, we've got ABC Warriors, which I'm really excited about, in the pipeline. I don't have a date on that. So loads of 2000 AD stuff. There is plenty more for Bolt Action, stuff for Victory at Sea, Blood Red Skies. There's all sorts at the minute, and it's going to be a really exciting year next year. So that's going to be really fun. Definitely one to keep an eye on.
That sounds really good. So and the next Italy book. Can you just tell us a little bit about what's going to be in that? I'm not asking you to give anything away, but just maybe give us a few clues. Where are we going? Time and place and.
Yeah, obviously. So Soft Underbelly, really covered the initial Allied invasion of Italy. And then, obviously, Tough Old Gut is going to cover where the campaign gets harder, where it gets slower, starting to push up into Italy. And if memory serves, it does cover up to the Italian surrender. So Monte Cassino is going to be in there, things like that. And that's going to be really interesting. So there's going to be, expect to see plenty of new Italian selectors and units and ways to play Italians. Probably some new German stuff, although I'm not certain. There's probably going to be some new Fallschirmjäger selectors and things.
That would be nice, yeah.
And then plenty of Allied stuff as well. And then loads of really cool scenarios for the campaign side of things. So that's going to be really interesting. I haven't had a chance myself to sit down with the manuscript just yet. But I know it's going to be a big one. Our campaign books have just been getting thicker and thicker year on year.
Yeah. And just looking at other gaming companies, like you mentioned, Games Workshop yourself, they typically have a plan for when they release stuff.
Yeah.
Do you guys have like a plan for the next year for
Yeah,
releases?
absolutely. I mean, every manufacturing company has to have a release plan. You know, it's just part of the essential nature of the business. So yeah, absolutely. We've got our release plan. You know, we've got our product handovers. You know, we know what's coming. We know when it's coming.
Yeah.
And you know that's all worked out by senior management and production. So yeah, there is absolutely a plan. You know, obviously, much the same as
the reason why I'm asking is, like, this year we got Soft Underbelly. That was the major book release of this year from Warlord Games for Bold Action.
Yeah.
So are we expecting that it will be like one book a year going forward?
Honestly, it's really hard to say because we've got so many games that what we'll do is, we try and treat each game appropriately to, the scale of the market. And, obviously, but we also don't want to let any games die through inattention. So some years, it might be multiple bolt action books. Some years it might only be one. Some, and I always say this to people when they're like, oh, my game hasn't been looked at by Warlord Games in a year.
And it's everyone's favorite. They need their stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Does this mean the game's getting discontinued? They've not given us a new thing in a year. It's like, no, it's just a case of, think back 6 months or a year when you had that big wave of releases.
Yeah.
It's obviously Bolt Action though being our biggest game. That is the one where, it does chug on a little bit more in the background. You can expect to see little odds and sods, small, maybe a unit here or a unit there. And then, obviously, a book, maybe 2 books, maybe no books. And it just depends on what's in the pipeline, what the market's doing, what we've decided we want to do as a strategy. And of course, what's being made, because, at the end of the day, if someone's writing a book and there's a delay, then that changes things. And of course, with COVID was the best example of that. We had to completely rewrite our release schedule. And we had to literally tear up the entire release schedule and go, right, we can't really do anything until we have some clarity over COVID. So, for example, Victory at Sea was the classic. And BRS Midway. There was supposed to be this year of the Pacific where Island Assault came out and Midway and Victory at Sea, and then COVID hit. So Island Assault was massively delayed. BRS Midway was massively delayed. And, when you get delayed items like that again, you have to think, right, now where are we going to put them in the release schedule in future? Where do they fit into the plan? So, there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes.
Yeah, I am glad I'm not sitting in that planning session, because that sounds like a job and a half. Right. So that was my questions for you about your job at Warlord Games and what's going on there. And then I have a few questions that are specifically Bolt Action related. And let me start with the one thing that for many of us, I'm a competitive player. I only play competitive Bolt Action. I don't really play for fun. I go to tournaments. That's what I do. I have other game systems that I play for fun. What's your stance on competitive play and that? Do you actually play Bolt Action at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say Bolt Action's probably the game I play the most of. It's certainly the Warlord game I play the most. And I don't go to as many tournaments as I'd like to. I used to go to a few more, just with obviously work and with helping people organise events. You kind of go, do I actually have time to do this? And,
no, you don't.
I really enjoy competitive Bolt Action. I think it's a fantastic game to play competitively because it's so simple. It's the best competitive games for me are very simple to learn, very difficult to master. And they have a number of ways that they can be mastered. There's not just one way to win a Bolt Action. I really enjoy competitive play. I've always enjoyed competition. I love sports. I love getting competitive and going sort of playing hard and playing fair. So I really enjoy that. I also really enjoy, casual Bolt Action gaming. I really like scenario play, stuff where it's not necessarily perfectly balanced, because then the competitiveness is, well, can you do this with, a weaker force? can you succeed historically where
Yeah.
someone else failed. So I really enjoyed sort of all kinds of bolt action. You know, but it's one of those where if I'm just having a pickup game, then I like to play it competitively. You know, it's a case of hey, we've turned up, let's just have a fun game. But, let's go hard.
Yeah. So you would basically rate yourself as mostly a casual / competitive player?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And maybe not so much as a rivet counter or a historical player, what we call them.
So for me, I like with my own army to make sure that the theming is correct, that I've got the paint right, that the unit's right, the uniforms look good. So I kind of enforce that on myself a little bit, but I don't necessarily enforce it on other people, because at the end of the day, it's their toy soldiers. If they're having fun with their models, then I've got no right to tell them, well, you can't have fun like that, that's wrong. So for me, I find it very satisfying personally to have, we might call it a rivet countery force, but it's not something that I expect, everyone else that I play must have it. I don't really mind if someone's Germans are painting it bright pink. If it's a good game, it's a good game.
Yeah. Right. It's always interesting to hear other people's perspective, because we're all coming at the game from different angles, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Then going into competitive play, I wanted to ask you, some of the more competitive players, we've already sort of figured out that there are a few nations that are maybe favored more than other nations in bold action, with free units and national special rules. For me, I play a lot of Brits, so I do love the idea of having of being able to choose your own national special rule. That really, I would want that to be for every nation, basically, if I could. Do you think that going forward, these should be better balanced, or is that just something that's too difficult to do?
So the thing to remember with bolt action was it was never designed to be a tournament war game. When it was first written, nobody sat down and went, right, this is going to be a tournament game. We're going to really push for tournaments. There was just, let's make a fun, good World War II war game. And then obviously the community picked it up and decided to play it competitively, which is really awesome.
So, that's because it has that one mechanic that's better than any other game with the order dice. That is simply amazing.
Absolutely. So, which means obviously, because it wasn't originally designed as a competitive game, there is stuff that is frankly wildly unbalanced. A British army turning up to 1,000-point game with 1,100 or potentially 1,250 points extra. That's pretty hard to balance against an army that gets potentially a more intangible special rule. Let's go to the extreme end and say Italians, or even Hungarians. It's very difficult to say, is this special rule worth 100, 200 points? So it's one of those where I think people have found a way, and it shows in the competitive scene that yes, you've got your British, a perennial contender. Soviets, French, Japanese to an extent, are perennial contenders on the top tournament scenes. But it shows because you see so many people playing so many different nations and winning with them, it's not an insurmountable challenge. Though it does, because the British get the free forward observer, they're automatically the best army, they're automatically broken. Not at all. I think it's very much, some armies do have special rules that are better than others at the moment. And some of that's because they're first edition books, things like that. Some of it's because they've got a more recent campaign book. I don't necessarily buy into the idea that there's a massive deal of codex creep, because the army books have been static for so long.
I actually think you're completely right. That was one of the things that made me leave Games Workshop and go to Warlord Games, because I don't find that there's a codex creep phenomenon going on here, and that really I really like that. And there are some game systems where you basically have to pay to win, where you constantly need to upgrade your units.
Absolutely.
I don't like that.
in terms of whether they're like fair or biased for competitive play, I would say that's up to the individual TO. That's very much, if you've got a gaming group, and a group of competitive players that all agree, no, we hate, the free units, we don't like them, we've got, even if, we've house ruled our own national characteristics, absolutely, crack on, run the event like that, because at the end of the day, that's what's best for the TO, for the players, to make that event as fun as possible. So it's not something that we're precious about at Warlord. It's not us saying, oh no, you must play it like this, otherwise you're having fun wrong and we won't support you. At the end of the day, the only correct way to play bolt action is the way where everyone has fun.
Yeah. And this question sort of runs into the next one that I wrote down, which is the point settings, because there are some things that points for value are not worth bringing, and we never see in competitive play.
The elephant in the room is MMGs versus early war light tanks with multiple medium machine guns.
Yes, that's the big one, but also the price setting of LMGs on infantry, and maybe how effective dog mine teams are for the Soviets. There's like all kinds of stuff. Do you think that there'll be a point where some of these point settings will get changed?
Probably in version 3, whenever that is. What we don't want to necessarily do is every 6 months,
no, don't ever.
And we've tweaked all of the points and everything's changed.
Yeah.
Because then, as you say, then suddenly it's like, oh, now I've got to buy a whole bunch of new stuff. So it's very much a case of, yes, there is stuff. We do take notice of it. We do take notice of the community feedback. I imagine whenever version 3 happens, MMGs are going to be cheaper, better, or both. Because it's one of those things everyone sort of jokes about in competitive bolt action. Why would you take an MMG team when you can just take Panzer 1 or a Renault FT? Or a Cruiser Mark 1 or something. But it's one of those where I don't think we're going to get into that business of trying to change points around mid-edition, if that makes sense.
No.
Because then suddenly it's like, okay, we've just seismically shifted the way the game works. Let's just look at all of this, note it all down, and whenever version 3 happens, then it's something we can consider. Then it's something we can change.
And that, of course, leads me into the question: version 3 question mark?
Yeah, at some point.
At some point.
Basically, as soon as version 2 came out, it was like, well, we're going to do version 3 at some point. I have absolutely no idea when, no idea what format it will take. I would suggest it's probably going to be inside the next decade. But that's it could come out tomorrow. It could come out in 2035. No, honestly, it's one of those where everyone knows it's going to happen. Every sort of 18 months, there's this great panic on in the online spaces. Oh, well, they're going to ruin the game. They're going to bring out 3rd edition, and it's all going to be awful. And it's like, guys, it's okay.
No, definitely not. My idea is that whenever Warlord Games releases version 3, it's going to be a cleanup of the rules. It's going to be, you're going to bring in all the FAQ stuff that you have to shift through right now to find what changed. All of that, I think, is going to be brought in, and as you said, maybe a few tweaks that will make some of the things that were not seen more worth it.
It could very well be that. It could be more change. It could be less change. Who knows? But I honestly don't know. It's one of those where we know that now, because we know that bolt action is so beloved, and there is that much more focus on competitive play. That's now something that we as a company can go into doing version 3 whenever we start that, with that mindset of, okay, it should probably be a bit more right for this. So, I think, we've got a great advantage. And as I say, this is just me speculating. I have absolutely no idea. For all I know, it might already be written, or for all I know, it might be, we're not planning it for years and years. So it's one of those, I find it very funny when people speculate about it. And people always seem to claim to have some inside information.
It's all bullshit. It's for me, it's all bullshit, because Warlord Games have been really good at sitting tight on any information about this, because of course they don't want to set themselves up to a deadline, basically. Because why would you? That makes absolute sense. But if ever you talk to your bosses, remind them that we are a lot of players who would enjoy playtesting and getting all that, helping you with anything we can. Right. A few years back, there was some talk about maybe setting up an official tournament pack and official tournament missions for Warlord games. And this turned out to be, yes, there are certain ideas about certain things that more or less are official, but mostly it was the whole we're going to support tournaments in this way, what you just described with the levels.
Yeah, so the whole thing with the official packs and the gold, silver, bronze thing, that was scrapped when I took over this role, because that was an experiment. It was, unfortunately, it led to us saying as a company, you have to play bolt action this way to get supported.
And that's what you don't want to do.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that's the right way to go about it. So in terms of an official tournament pack,
no.
What there is going to be, which I'm slowly working on and writing, is what I'm calling a suggested pack. And that is in case a brand new TO gets in touch with me and says, hey, Marcus, I've never run a tournament before, but I really want to, but I don't know about like what I should include and what I shouldn't. I don't know what missions to have. And what I'll be able to give them is a little pack and go, right, use as much of this or as little of this as you like.
Yeah.
This is just how I personally would do it, but you change whatever you want, because at the end of the day, it's the TO's event. They're in charge because they know their players, they know the community, and they know they've got the most vested interest in everyone having fun. As for missions, we've got quite a few really good ones that have been generated by various people in the community, and outside of the community, inside Warlord. And, there's lots of those where, it might actually be quite nice one day to compile them. But again, that's very much not saying you must play these missions or you must play the missions like this. It's just saying, here's some missions. If you want to play with them as written, crack on. If you want to change them, crack on. If you want to scrap them and do your own thing, awesome. So it's very much more about having guidelines for everyone rather than rules.
Yeah, guidelines and help and like resources to pull from. That's always nice. Right. One of the things that when we're talking about version 3, one of the things that often comes up in many of the forums, and I've sort of, because I ended up YouTubing a lot about bolt action, I sort of get dragged into this debate quite often. It's the rules as written versus rules as intended. There's a lot of debates that basically come down to this all the time, whether or not the intent behind the rule is something or what it actually says. And believe me, once we get into the translations of the rules, then it gets even worse.
Oh, God. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say for me, it's very much a case of anyone who says authoritatively, this is how the rule is intended. If they didn't write that rule, then they don't necessarily know how the rule was intended.
Yeah.
We're not. There's no way to mind read, Alessio or Beth or Mark or any of the other book authors. So I've always gone with rules as written, because that's in black and white on the page in front of you. And then if there is a dispute, speak to the TO. And when the TO makes their ruling, that's the ruling. That's how to play it. And it doesn't matter if that was a different ruling from a different TO at another event. If I ask a TO a question at one event, that's how I'm going to play it for the rest of their event. And I think, when you get like rules as written, yes, there's a lot more, you can loophole this, you can, Recce being a classic, or, Banzai declaring assaults declaring impossible assaults and things. But
the last one was definitely those declarations of assault, and it just got cleared up by the FAQ team, where
that's the kind of thing.
as the rules were written, you couldn't actually place a run order on a unit in area terrain. And
that's one of those
that
things
meant
where,
that they couldn't go into a house, they couldn't
Yeah.
enter a transport, they couldn't assault.
And it's one of those things where every so often a question like that will come up, where rules as written are confusing. Rules as written don't make sense.
Yeah.
But by looking at rules as written, eventually the question gets asked. We go to the FAQ team, and then the writers are able to tell us this is what was intended.
Yeah.
So let's change the rules as written to reflect the rules as intended. So I don't like to try and second guess. I'd rather just go and ask. Whether that's asking Theo for an on-the-day ruling or sending Alessio and the team an email and going, well, hey, how is it supposed to work? And then they'll change the rule to reflect that in the wording.
I think that's a good way to go, and I would highly encourage anyone who has difficulties with the rules, who don't understand paragraphs, write to Warlord Games. Just write them an email, and maybe your question will go in the FAQ, maybe not, but at least they will know that this is an issue there was with the rules going on version 3. And at the same time, it will clear up maybe other people's confusion with that section.
100%. I mean, one of the things that I do find is the vast majority of rules questions can be answered with the phrase "read the rulebook."
Yep.
A lot
that is the first go-to. I mean, yeah. As soon as you enter any debate on the internet, start by, can I get a rules reference for that, please?
Yeah. And you see it a lot on the internet, unfortunately, and social media. Social media is great, but sometimes it's awful. And, you'll see people, someone will ask innocently, will ask a question. Maybe they're a new player that doesn't understand a rule. And then you'll get 40 or 50 comments of competitive players arguing backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it'll be, Warlord don't care, Warlord hate the game, Warlord hates competition. And then right down at the bottom, there'll be someone lovely coming in with, oh yeah, mate, so if you read page 53, this paragraph covers that. It's a little bit awkward because it's over the page. But yeah, this and the guy that asked the original question will go, oh, thank you, that's brilliant. And
that was what I needed, yeah.
And a 40 to 50 comment flame war was completely unnecessary. But yeah, email info@warlordgames.com. What we'll do is we'll probably either say it's on this page in the rulebook, or chances are we'll be able to answer it ourselves and go, okay, yeah, this has been asked us a few times, this is how this works. Yeah. Or, in some cases, we genuinely do get questions where it's like, you know what, that's a really good point. Let's get that into the FAQ. Let's ask for a ruling.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. That's the way to do it. Just talk to us, because we're not this huge faceless corporation. There's like 80 people at Warlord.
And you know what, Marcus? By the way, that description of the internet, I have been all 3 of the guys you described. I have been the guy asking the question. I have been the competitive player just throwing shit at people, and I have been the guy just, well, if you read page 12.
Yeah, I think we all have. We're all guilty of that from time to time, which is great because it shows that people care. In a kind of weird, ironic sort of way. When I see a thing kick off in the Bolt Action Facebook page about competitive Bolt Action, and everyone's getting really nasty, and it's like, right, guys, let's tone it down. Let's not have a fight here. But I love to see that people care. I'd rather see a little bit of, actually, no, I'm getting it in my back up because I care, over just, tumbleweed and silence because nobody cares.
Yeah.
So, as long as everyone's generally excellent to each other, and, the line is respected and everyone's respectful, robust discussion, there's nothing wrong with that.
Cool. Now we come to the section where I ask you the questions that the fans have been posting to me that we should get to. And before I do that, I will give my own, because I have one that I wanted to throw at someone at Warlord Games myself, and it's a pet peeve of mine that came up recently. Can we have please one version of the fortification rules? God. If you look through the campaign books, there are like 3 or 4 versions of barbed wire, and it annoys me.
This is actually, obviously, I remember you got in touch with us about it.
Okay.
I think this has been a discussion that we have had in the studio, and we've said, hey, maybe let's look at the future campaign books, saying these are the rules for fortifications that you must use. But we've also looked at it from the point of view of, are all of these authors trying to actually represent something slightly different, and and therefore that's why they're different, and that's why that one thing in one book is the way it is, and it's different somewhere else. So that's still an ongoing discussion. Stay tuned. That might be an FAQ, Johnny, or it might be a case of, as I said online, for a TO, pick whichever version you want to use and stick with that. And
that was the first answer I got as well. Yeah.
And just be able to, and that's the thing. Part of what I do with the tournament organisation is supporting and enabling TOs to have the confidence to make those rules. So that's what for TOs. It's your event. You're the boss. You make the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now here comes the question. So 3D printing. Is Warlord Games going to go into 3D printing, or is it just a competitor that you are trying to fight?
It's a weird one. I don't really think it's a competitor for us. It's very much a different segment. People that 3D print their entire army probably weren't going to come and shop with us anyway. I don't think that there's any danger of us moving into 3D printing as a business, like selling things anytime soon. We've got a lot of investment in plastic, in metal, in traditional resin, obviously in the new Warlord resin as well. And we're quite a traditional models company. But with that said, 3D printing is an amazing tool. We use 3D printing in the studio to do things like first tests. So if one of our sculptors digitally sculpts a model, and we want to just get an impression of, okay, what does this look like roughly, in the hand and on the table before we go and make molds of it and go and send it to tooling. That's the kind of thing we'll 3D print them. And we'll have a look and go, oh, yeah, that looks good. Oh, that looks a bit thin. Can we change that?
Yeah.
So it's a really useful part of the production process. And it's got 3D printing in the future. Who knows where it's going to go? 10 years time, we could look back at this and I look really silly because, there's some new advance in technology.
It's absolutely possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the minute, no, it's certainly not something that, we're massively worried about. It's also not something that we're going to start. Oh yeah, overnight Warlord Games is going to be an STL company. It's just another part of the hobby industry.
Yeah. Then comes a question from Scotland, from an unnamed Scot. What products do you use for your hair care?
I'm glad someone's noticed. I don't know how well it's showing up on camera, but I've got pretty good hair, I like to think. Honestly, just Tresemme shampoo that's designed for sort of long, dry hair. Shampoo it every morning, a couple of times a week, give it some conditioner. That's about it.
Man, you actually answered that one. Okay, yeah. Next question. What research goes into a campaign book?
So that's really interesting. I've never written a campaign book myself. But obviously, I know people that do, I've worked with people that have. And it is, it starts from a period of having to understand your subject matter. So there is a lot of reading that goes into it. Sometimes we will work with people who are subject matter experts already. And for them, the most part of the research is making sure the rules work. But then for other people, they're rules experts. And the biggest part of the research is making sure the history is correct. Yeah. So there's no one answer, unfortunately. That's very much something that you want to ask, one of the campaign book writers about their personal experience. And I suspect every single one you ask, you'll have a different answer.
They will, definitely will. But research may be the main starting point, and then jotting down ideas anyways, and then getting someone to fill out the gaps that you have. So if you're a rules lawyer, then you fill out the history gap.
Yeah. And that's then they obviously it'll go to play testing, and then it'll go and get approved, and then obviously there's the things that studio might turn around at head office and go, well, actually, we don't like that, or we don't want that. Or could you include this? And it'll go back and forth, however many times it needs to go back and forth. The research side of it is just a case of making sure that because it's not like 40K, for example, or Conflict 47. We can't just make it up. These are real people and real history, so you have to be respectful and sensitive towards that and deal with it faithfully and accurately.
And some of them are still alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. And that goes for my next question, because last weekend I was binge watching the new Rogue Heroes TV series. How does something like that influence a business where you're basically selling model soldiers? Much of what you're doing is the Second World War. People are still alive. Some people are still alive that fought in that war.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, I think I do need to send the BBC a Christmas card to say thank you for making my job writing articles so easy for the last couple of weeks. You know, I've just finished an article about the SAS and how you can convert them out of the plastics and how you can kit bash a Jeep to make it look more deserty. And that's purely because of Rogue Heroes, because, you know, people are like, oh, you know, we're thinking about you said. And that's the thing, you know, we kind of pay attention to stuff like that in the marketing department when I'm doing my writing job. You know, we'll look at it and go, oh, this has come out. We better do something on this.
Better hurry up,
Well, you know, oh, it's the anniversary of this event. You know, let's look at doing something for it. And that, you know, that's just part of marketing. Any business that has a marketing arm and a marketing department will do exactly the same thing. It's just, you know, we're in the sort of unique position of dealing with history. So we're not so much, we don't care so much about current events. But then when something like Rogue Heroes comes into the cultural zeitgeist and it's, you know, put the SAS and the LRDG at the forefront of public imagination and vision, then yeah, absolutely, we jump on that and, you know, yeah, sweet, let's push. So yeah, absolutely, things like that do influence us as a business. Not so much in a case of, oh, we're gonna, you know, immediately snap to and release a new line. But it's definitely, you know, because that's not how production works. But it's
it takes time. It takes a long time.
It's definitely something more like a case of, okay, this is out. Well, what can we show off? You know, maybe we'll do a battle report. Maybe we'll show off these existing products. Maybe we'll highlight some conversions and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of how it influences us as a business. I imagine the resin casting team have had to do a few extra shifts casting SAS Jeeps and Chevrolets as well.
Yeah, that will definitely happen. I know a lot of people who are like, ooh, SAS, I need to. Yeah.
They're just cool.
Yeah, really. And it's a really good TV series for people who haven't seen it. It's definitely watchable. It's for me, it's up there with Band of Brothers. It's really good. Right.
It's all about the soundtrack for me. I think it's a really good idea to mix the modern soundtrack with, you know, the historical action. You know, it's just cool. It's
really cool. Idea. Yeah, it is. Right. Another question here. Will there be a bolt action modern at one point, do you think?
No idea. To be perfectly honest, probably not. And the same goes for things like bolt action Vietnam, bolt action World War I, you know, bolt action Cold War. To be honest, there's still so much stuff to do with World War II and Korea. And obviously with us acquiring Conflict 47, there's that as well. And, you know, we would much rather do one thing very well than, you know, have like, oh, we've got like 2 squads for modern and like a small range for World War I and some random vehicles. You know, sometimes
because you're gonna need, if you go into making a bold action modern, you're gonna of course not just make the book. You're going to have the miniatures ranges as well.
Yeah, why would we make a book for something that's going to tell people to go to our competitors and give them money for their models?
That makes no sense.
So it's one of those things where, like, for sometimes though, things will come along. So the Centurion, which we did for Korea, it was so easy to create the variants for Israel and for Australia and Vietnam. And we were like, well, let's just do that. That literally takes like an extra day or something. Just make those. And, you know, those are something that we haven't released. You know, they're in the new releases cabinet. And, you know, they'll get their time eventually. But those are very much a thing of, it doesn't herald this new range.
No, it just helps modelers who wants to build something else.
Yeah, and, you know, someone comes to us in their shop and find World War II Russians. I don't know, a Vietnam Australian Centurion. They might pick that up as well. But yeah, like Korea was a little bit of a departure, but the most important thing for us with Korea is you can actually use a lot of the World War II stuff. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
Soviet infantry is pretty good for it. Your U.S. Marines are great for summer. You know,
Yep.
the T-34s, the Churchills, the Cromwells, and you know there was already that core of the range that we had. So
Yep.
it was very much a case of, well, let's do some metals, a couple of new vehicles, and the book comes out. And, you know, that's something we're going to keep developing. But yeah, like other periods outside of that, vanishingly unlikely at the moment. You know, maybe one day, but that's going to be a long, long time away if it ever happens.
So for now, it's sticking with the Second World War.
Yeah.
I. If I can throw something again at you,
Yeah.
then consider doing a little bit more of the periphery of sometimes going into like for me, I would really like to see something with East Africa, with Ethiopia and Italy in the East African sector, or maybe the Middle East as well. That could
Yeah, I
be
mean,
really cool. I do
those
love me some
things.
desert and some like
Yeah. Well, those things are the kind of thing that we kind of have to find somebody to write them.
yeah.
And a lot of the time, a campaign book might actually come about because someone gets in touch with us and says, hey, I've written all these rules or I've written this book. You
Yeah.
know, do you want to have a relationship? You know, do you want to see about making this official? And, you know, we might have a look and decide maybe
Yeah,
not.
maybe
Or
yeah.
we might have a look and go, yeah. So for a lot of the more niche stuff, those are really passion projects for, you know,
They are.
one or two people. Then it's a real labor of love to go and produce one of these books to the right standard. And then obviously for us as a business, it has to work as well. So if someone's, you know, gone out and written a book for something that we don't make any of,
Yeah.
then, you know, that's going to be a much lower priority for
It
us
is. Yeah.
than someone coming in and making a book for something that we sell the models for already.
Yeah.
But as I say, obviously, you know, we've done most of the major campaigns so far. You know, so there's kind of not really anywhere else to go but the more random stuff. So that is definitely going to be something that we will see more of. You know, obviously, personally, I think it's only a good thing. You know, to see more unusual theatres.
Yeah.
So you know that will happen.
That sounds cool. Then I had a viewer write, ask him about experimental vehicles in a book, please. So there's a lot of, I think in the British Army they were called the funnies.
Yes.
And if you look at what the Germans came up with, they made a lot of experimental weapons and like tank conversions. Could that be a thing, actually, like making a whole book of all these weird and wonderful tanks that, and
I mean,
vehicles that?
it certainly could be. I mean, a lot of them have found their way into the rule books anyway. I mean, for the
Yeah,
classic for me is the Flak Panzer V Quellian.
yeah.
You know,
The
I think that
Kugelblitz. Yeah,
the Kugelblitz, the mouse. You know, so a lot of the stuff is in there already. You know, buried in some campaign book or other. Or my absolute favourite, the Puma, which we worked. I think we worked out. I can't remember how long it is, but over not even a year, we sell more Pumas than were ever created in real life. You know, there's more Pumas in our warehouse, I think, than ever existed.
they never existed.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Which I always find funny because you can't, you know, used to be back in the good old days of version 1 that they
Yep.
were mandatory.
Yeah.
But no, as I say, so an experimental vehicles book would be an interesting one, certainly. You know, at the end of the day, they are cool. You know, there's a reason stuff like the Flak Panzer V and the Kugelblitz are in books. There's a reason, you know, there's all this weird and wonderful stuff, and that's because it's cool. You
Yeah.
know, whether there's a modelling opportunity, whether it's a chance to have some fun rules,
Yeah.
or whether it just looks good. So it's, you know, I'd say probably not a book overall of just experimental vehicles, but what you are likely to see is, you know, loads of experimental vehicles just end up in campaign books and armies of books over time, just as, you know, people go, oh, there was one of these, maybe, perhaps, potentially rumoured to be in this theatre. Let's chuck it in the book. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that, yeah, you know, I don't think there's going to be an enormous rush. I don't know if we brought out, I mean, imagine like a Landkreutzer or something. It'd have to be a table that you played on instead of a vehicle.
But you know what? I know people who are actively seeing if they can scratch build one of those.
I think I've seen the pictures online. It's incredible.
Mind-boggling.
But no, yeah, it's one of those where probably not a book, but it is something that, you know, we do keep putting in things because they're cool. And at the end of the day, this is a game about having fun with cool toy soldiers.
Yeah, it is. It is. Right. Before we end, Marcus, I have one final question, and that is, what is on the game table for you in the future? Are you going to go to any events in the future? I know that the UK events have made a whole tournament sort of where all the tournaments are connected. Are you going to show up for any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's quite difficult kind of arranging it all in conjunction with my job. But yeah, I'd love to go some more. Unfortunately, I was supposed to get to Hell and back this weekend and I couldn't make it. But you know, that just is what it is. So you know, there's events I love to go to. You know, I've always enjoyed going to Russ Wright's ones at SSWG. You know, I really enjoyed the atmosphere when I went up to Scotland and put on the Scottish Open. So I'd love to go up there as a player at some point. And then, you know, I'd like to get overseas at some point in the future, you know, over to Europe or over to the States to play some games. But that's very much a case of convincing work that it's definitely a business expense.
It's really important that I go to.
Yeah. So yeah, plenty of gaming, plenty of bolt action. I need to finish my Soviet army because I've got quite an unpleasant little Soviet list because I got tired.
Have you got what everyone else has got, like a huge pile of shame that needs to be painted?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. I have this weird problem where every time I go into the shop, my wallet opens and money flies out of it, and then I come home and suddenly there's more things in my pile of shame. I've spoken to my doctor. I've spoken to scientists.
There's no help. There's no help.
Yeah.
It's the pain is real, people. The pain is real. Now we have to stay on the internet and talk about it instead of painting miniatures.
Well, 99% of the hobby is talking about when you eventually go to do hobby. So I mean, in fact, I've also got a really early war sort of first day in Poland, Blitzkrieg German army that I've been slowly working through that I want to finish, and then every time I sit down, I find something that's massively more important I must do. And then 4 hours later, I've been sat there watching documentaries and eating crisps going, I should have been painting, really, shouldn't I?
Right. Thank you.
Thank
you so much for coming, Marcus. It has been very, very cool to talk to you. And I really enjoy that. Do you have any final messages for the viewers and listeners of this channel?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, only really one, which is just what I've been reiterating on every channel I've been on, every podcast I've been on. There is no wrong way to play bolt action competitively. You know, there is no way that makes Warlord sad. There's no way that makes us happy except the way that gives you the most fun. So for everyone out there that's running an event, that's playing an event, do what you enjoy. And don't
have fun. Yeah.
Don't let the idea that, but we've had to house rule this, or we've changed that. Don't let that put you off. And of course, wherever you are in the world, if you are running a tournament, an event of any kind, doesn't even necessarily need to be a competitive tournament, get in touch with us. We want to support you. We want to give free stuff, and we want to shout about the achievements the community's making. So just get in touch with us so that we can help you.
That is a cool and very optimistic and upbeat message. Thank you so much, Marcus. It has been a pleasure talking to you. And that is it. Cheers, everyone.